And as they do so, let me introduce our moderator for this panel. We're very happy to welcome Rita Trichur, who is an award-winning journalist, currently the financial services editor for the Globe and Mail, and a Canadian business columnist for the Report on Business magazine. Most of us here, however, know Rita when she covered the telecom industry for the Globe for a number of years. She left the Globe for a bit and then came back in July 2016 after having spent, I guess, a little over 2 years as a reporter for the Wall Street Journal's Canadian Bureau. It's good to have Rita back. I'm sure having been outside of the industry for a spell gave her some perspective. Maybe we'll hear a little bit about that. And it's our pleasure to welcome Rita back to the Canadian Telecom Summit. She'll be moderating our panel looking at artificial intelligence. Please join me in welcoming Rita, and she'll introduce our panelists.
Thanks, Michael. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to our panel discussion on artificial intelligence. As Michael said, my name is Rita Trichur, and I'm an editor at the Globe and Mail. So as a journalist, I have the privilege of speaking with a lot of executives across a number of industries. And I also chat with our readers who are often investors of those businesses. And without a doubt, I can tell you that AI is among the top business trends that they're watching this year. Well, next to cryptocurrencies and cannabis, but AI is up there as well. When it comes to artificial intelligence, much of the discussion focuses on two themes: disruption and innovation. And both are fascinating narratives. As you've all heard, Tesla's Elon Musk has said that AI could be humanity's biggest existential threat. And Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg has taken a different view. He's dismissed that talk as fear-mongering, and he's talked about how we should be looking at AI's potential instead. And really, by some estimates, that potential is absolutely eye-popping. According to one forecast, the global market for AI is expected to be worth up to $1.2 trillion US by 2025. And it's predicted that it'll touch every industry from telecom, tech, to retail, to banking, to healthcare. Even our federal government is jumping on the AI bandwagon. There was recently news that Ottawa plans to use AI to determine how it mounts legal challenges to immigration and refugee claims. It's a pilot project designed to reduce government lawyers' need to perform their own legal research. But for investors, much like executives and business journalists such as myself, we're most interested in learning about how AI will help businesses make money. And there's been plenty of newsworthy developments on that front. Just this week, for instance, Microsoft said it was buying GitHub for $7.5 billion US in stock. The acquisition is all part of a broader plan to bolster its cloud and AI strategy. But many companies are still in the early stages of AI. And that means there have also been some notable flops. I think we all remember what happened with Microsoft's AI bot. It had to be shut down less than 24 hours after launch because apparently some online users had taught it how to be racist, and it was sending out inappropriate tweets. And Facebook has suffered some snafus with its own bot and with the trending issues feature. But despite those setbacks, there's no doubt in my mind anyway that AI presents an incredible opportunity to bolster innovation and improve productivity for businesses. Still, companies have got to get it right. BlackBerry CEO John Chen has said that when it comes to AI, everyone should be concerned about what he calls surveillance capitalism. He says that data protection and security should be our top concerns. But businesses must also assess a whole host of other issues. Will the costs of implementing AI outweigh the benefits? What are the ethical issues? What are the policy considerations? Can humans really be phased out for certain roles? As for policymakers, the big question is, how should Canada maintain its competitive edge in AI? A number of global companies, including LG, Google, Microsoft, they're all funding AI research in Canada. But how do we ensure that the top AI talent stays here when Silicon Valley is just next door? And as some critics point out, the US offers better salaries and a more competitive tax regime for both businesses and individuals. So, should we embrace or fear what's coming? Well, our panelists today have lots to say about the AI opportunities and challenges. They include Jaime Leverton of Cogeco Peer 1, Hassan Alzein of DXC Technology, Ian Hood of Red Hat, Brian Carpenter of Pure Storage, and TELUS's Shawn Mandel. Please take a look at their bio sheets to learn more about their backgrounds and their perspectives. We are going to begin with brief opening remarks from each of the panelists before plunging into our discussion and then taking questions from the audience. And we're going to begin with Jaime.
Thank you, Rita. Excuse me. I've got a bit of a cold. This topic is one of incredible interest to me. As Rita mentioned, I'm with Cogeco Peer 1. I run our business in Canada and Asia Pacific. We have 16 global data centers. We run a connectivity network. And since Peer 1's inception in 1999, we've been working really, really closely with emerging technologies and emerging businesses, and continue to do so today, partnering with a number of Canada's most innovative companies in artificial intelligence, machine learning, quant, blockchain. And for me, the topic of AI is even a more personal one. I was lucky enough growing up to have computers in the house, and I started programming on my dad's VIC-20 when I was a kid. And I would write pages and pages of code to get the computer to just say, my name is Jaime, over and over and over and over again. And then as I went through my formal education, I actually did my MBA with a concentration in marketing informatics, which was when I was playing around with SAS Enterprise Miner, and we were starting to really understand the power of data and how we could harness intelligence for CRM and market analysis from that data. And so to watch the industry evolve to where it is today and see AI and machine learning and blockchain technologies all kind of coming together at the same time to create what really is an evolution or a revolution for us in the technology industry is incredibly fascinating, and I'm excited to be part of it. So that's who I am and why I'm here.
Okay, we'll next hear from Hassan.
So I'm part of DXC Technology, and DXC is really a company that was formed back in 2017 as a merger of Computer Science Corporation and HP Enterprise Services. The reason I'm talking about DXC Technology because pretty much we all know that enterprises are going through digital transformation, which is really what DXC have gone and pretty much embark on and moved into their journey. Digital transformation is really becoming important for enterprises as we are really seeing a key three things happening in the industry and in the society. We're looking into the consumers, and it's becoming the center of the attention. It's becoming really in charge. It's really demanding more and more. And that's already driving a lot of attention from everybody to look into the data surrounding what the consumers are doing. In the same token, we are looking into enterprise who are really looking into a disruptors that's pretty much coming into the marketplace and taking over new vertical or an industry and changing the way we are operating. And the last thing is really we're looking into some disruptive technology, which is really leading in how we need to embrace it and use it and leverage it. And that's really become really the center of why we're talking here about AI. Because it's important to really look into the massive amount of data and how we want to drive enterprise to become really a data-driven enterprise and focus into a driven business model. Having said that, really, we really understand and we see that all CEO are looking to pretty much grow organically as part of their roadmaps, as part of their strategy. But in the same time, they are looking to take advantage of the value of the data. It's been reported that industries reporting that's only, we're leveraging 40% of the true value of the data that we have within our own handle. And in the same time, industries and enterprises realize that AI is inevitable. It's going to happen. The technology is there, and it has left the lab pretty much phase. And they really rely on AI to become critical for their transformation into the new model, into the new organization, and even on how to really start looking into building a new skill set and the way they really embark it. But also in the same token, how to reduce their cost and increase revenue. But all these things is really coming with a set of challenges. You know, enterprises are looking into a way of how they want to start with the AI journey. They want to understand how they can utilize the benefit of AI, how they want to really start looking into integrating AI into their systems, because we have existing system in businesses. And in the same time, they want to really understand how they want to start with the AI journey. So there's a business needs, and there's a need to how to build a roadmap that allow them to get into this AI journey. One thing that really it's important and critical to look at is that there's been a lot of discussions around AI and what it is, and a lot of buzzwords around AI and machine learning and deep learnings. But the whole idea is to look at it as it's really the way we are making the machine introduce a smart thinking to really make it act and operate and execute like a human person, or typically mimic a human intelligence. But this is really all great, but it has to come with a strategy on how you want to really implement it. You want to start really as a big, or you want to start small. You want to really go with a process of testing, deployment, follow a trial and error, or you want to really go and make it generic. The key things to look at AI is to ensure that it has to have a business context before we even start looking at AI as a technology. We need to have a KPI at the end of the day that allow us to get the value that we're expecting from AI. But also in the same token, we need to get ready to understand where is AI going in terms of the workforce that we have. And Rita talked about two things. Is it going to really replace what we do? Is it going to really take over the human? Or is it going to really be empowering the human and make the workforce more smarter and more intelligence, focusing on the key complex things that we are facing in this society? So AI for us is really critical and important at DXC. We've come with a way to help enterprises follow an industrialized AI process, because we believe the starting point of any AI strategy is to really go into a true access to all of the data that you have. You need to have access to all the data throughout any enterprise. You have to really look at it, and you have to really embrace it, cleanse it, and pretty much go through a truly focused process. So I'm glad to be part of this panel.
Great. We're going to go next to Ian.
Thanks, and it's really good to be back here at home in Toronto to speak to this audience. It's always good to do that. And with Red Hat, as you may have seen on Monday from Chris, our goal is really to share ideas openly, with open source technologies across any of these disruptive things. I just want to kind of take a few points that, as I thought about this panel. So there's certainly lots of promise, to take advantage of this, intelligence explosion. That's going to affect our civilization overall, right? But one of the things that was talked about on Monday is that, rather than look all the way to the end game of what AI can do for us, we have to kind of take our practical small steps and take, use of the technology we have in hand today and evolve those forward to make use of them. And as with any disruptive technology, there's more and more open source projects out there, and so just as we've seen with the networking technologies, AI has a few as well, and we've got people like Google putting them forward, whether it's TensorFlow, H2O, Acumos. All of these projects are focused on actually how do we make it easier for more people to take advantage of AI without everyone on the planet having to be an AI expert, right? That's really kind of a key challenge we have as well. And these things can actually help, to train your data, to make these algorithms more useful. But a real key thing I think about all of this from just a human perspective is that while it can solve all these challenges, whether it's microfinances, agriculture, transport, imaging, right? We've got to make sure that it is, inclusive and diverse, right? And we've got to minimize the human bias because basically, if humans program the computers, we naturally have some bias, right? So how do we kind of keep bias out of the equation? And so really technology can, in essence, benefit or hurt us. And so it's really a responsibility of all of us, right, to make sure that, this is available to the whole of us. And that's really kind of the whole thing behind open source as it is. And it's not just, for the discoverer, right? And we all need to kind of aspire to that kind of approach. So that's kind of my thoughts to start this.
That's great. That's a good starting point. Brian, you're up next.
Yeah, thank you. So, from being from Pure Storage, we obviously take a very data-centric point of view to things, and frankly, this business transformation, everybody loves to say transformation is a data-driven transformation, right? And so, as people have to create and ingest and then interpret and understand this data, it's really important for these organizations to understand exactly what they're trying to do, work on all the things that are important to that business, and really focus on their core competencies. We have the benefit of kind of working with a lot of different people from our position on the challenges that they have, right? And so we've seen even some of the largest hyperscalers in the world that have hundreds of data scientists sitting around just thinking things up, they still bang their heads on what artificial intelligence is to them and even some of the day-to-day operations in it. So the value there for us is that we get to learn from them and learn with them, right? Artificial intelligence right now is very much a sharing economy. You'll see people learn. There's a lot of cross-communication. I think I have a posture that a lot of these models are going to end up being kind of shared models where you just go grab them off the shelf and go do that, and the business then has to kind of customize it for themselves. From a Pure perspective, right? Frankly, I appreciate your program. I think it's a lot more intelligent than a lot of the chatbots that we've talked to today. So I think most of the chatbots come back to me and say, I am Jaime, I am Jaime, I'm Jaime. So there's a lot of improvement that still needs to be done. There's a lot of things that are going on, and from our perspective, it's really about being there to help. And we get the benefit of getting pulled into a lot of different things, right? So, and from a Canadian perspective, one of the largest houses from an AI perspective is right here in your home, right? And as a customer of ours, working with Element AI and seeing the things that they get to learn and sharing information back from them on things that we've learned is really what it's all about, right? So, we look forward to it. Frankly, I'm excited to get to the next part, which is arguing with everybody here on the panel. So I'm going to stop talking and let him talk.
Okay, last but not least, Shawn, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm Shawn Mandel, and I run the digital office at TELUS. And this idea and this riddle of how do we democratize machine learning to the average team member, I think is very analogous to another journey that we've been on around how we've driven digital skills and capabilities to the rest of the organization. So probably about 6 years ago, we embarked upon a digital journey as an organization, and the challenge ahead of us is how do we push down digital skills and how do we push those capabilities to the average team member? If digital, as an example, is this one thing that team over there does, we're not going to be successful as an organization. And that for us was a big cultural mindset and kind of massive change management exercise within the organization. It required us to think through strategy and governance. It required us to activate use cases. It required us to create review boards. It required us to, partner and create an ecosystem of people around it. And so when you kind of fast forward the clock and you think about the tenets of how to drive, an AI acumen and how to drive machine learning through the organization, very similar rules start to apply. And I think that's what's interesting for all of us is this riddle of how do you actually democratize a machine learning algorithm to the average team member inside of an organization that has 50,000 people. And so when you start to kind of break that idea apart, you realize there's really no one silver bullet that solves this problem. So this idea of a series of activities working in concert with each other that allow you to make the appropriate investments, that allow you to coordinate across teams internally, that allow you to run experiments and trials, that allow you to create a very robust talent pipeline are the types of things that we're investing in now. And I look forward to spending time with you guys today and talking all about it.
Great, so we'll plunge right into our discussion. I want to start with a discussion about the AI opportunities. But first, I want to hear from each of you whether where we are on the AI roadmap. A lot of people talk about AI as it's a very futuristic thing, but some people say it's actually here now. Where are we all? And maybe you can start.
Sure. The technology is there, and there's a lot of advance in the technology. In parallel, there is also transformation in the way we are operate and we are moving. And if we looked into those two things and we looked into a third dimension, which is really how much we are spending and investing in AI, we should be able to give a clear idea about really the type of investments and type of work that really we are seeing in every industry, every verticals. We're seeing really AI across the financial market, across the retail, across the banking, across automotive manufacturing, telco. So really we start seeing enterprises looking to really pretty much embrace AI and looked into the way to deploy AI. It's really becoming a reality from technological perspective. And we're looking also on the technology aspect, and we're seeing big companies like Google of the world and Microsoft and Facebook, and they are committed to this. And they are pretty much investing a lot of resource and money. And the third thing is really we look into the academic aspect, where we're seeing them getting ready also to embrace AI. So it is definitely there. We are seeing it use it in pretty much 3 areas. In DXC, we are using it in the way we deliver services. That's an example of how we are leveraging it, for example, to bring efficiency, to bring productivity, but also we are bringing it into the vertical solution that we provide to our customers. And that's really a true kind of example of where we as an enterprise are using it today.
Does everyone agree that it's still relatively early stage, or are you finding in your own businesses that perhaps you're further down the roadmap than others?
I'd say we're still, pretty much for early ages. We've got certainly there's been investments in it for the last 5 years, whether it's Google, whether it's as Shawn mentioned, they've been investing in it for a while. AT&T's been investing in it for a while. I look at the telcos in Europe and Asia, Australia. They've all been investing in it for a while. Now we're starting to see them actually gain some fruit from the things that they've done. But they're having to go through the process of having to invest with, as I said before, a lot of data scientists to actually, get the work done. And now they want to find ways to speed that process up and to take advantage of it for whether it's automating, the network. That's really an important one to, get more capacity out of it, do those kind of things in that manner. Or, is the service that I've actually got in hand, what's the take rate on it? Should I change this service? Oh, is it failing? Right? Those kind of things are what they're looking at using AI for, and I've seen examples of this already in play. There's certainly more to be done, and then of course the challenge is that it used to be that just like Jaime said that we all started programming certain things. I've actually had the advantage of working for Motorola in the past when they built supercomputers that lived on submarines. Right? So we're not going to have these supercomputers everywhere. So now we're going to have a distributed version of a distributed compute problem. So we're going to have to find out how to take advantage of that AI and distribute it, just like networking technologies, to take advantage of to a broader sense out to the edges of the network to get to the customers and the businesses.
Excuse me, I just had a little giggle remembering that in the early days of the original supercomputer mainframe, there was a belief that the entire world would only ever need 3.
Exactly.
And now our cell phones have that compute in them. Adobe actually released a study recently that said 15% of enterprises have actively adapted AI. So that indicates that we're still early. But that same study also said that within the next 12 months, 31% have plans to have it implemented in their environment. So I think we're right there on the curve where it's coming into the enterprise in a significant way. The other study I read, which I think is fascinating and one that we need to wrestle with a bit more as an industry, is 72% of business leaders believe that AI is critical to their success and will be a competitive advantage for them. But IT professionals, only 43%, I think the stat was, have that same belief. So we definitely have a bit of a chasm between IT's view on AI and the power of it and the business leaders.
And what do you attribute to that difference? Why that difference of opinion?
My personal belief is that it likely has a lot to do with the hype cycle a little bit. I think business leaders tend to read something in a magazine and think it's the next big thing and it's going to change everything. IT teams tend to be a little bit more pragmatic, and they've been through these hype cycles before. But I also think that there's a bit of a protectionism in the traditional IT groups where they're afraid that it's going to mean job loss directly to their functions. And that's something we as leaders need to be really sensitive to and understand how we find the balance between the vision and the reality, and we navigate those waters.
Jaime, I see that the same thing. When I talk to the different levels of the organization, there's the vision, the hype piece of it, and there's claims that I'm going to either save this certain amount of money and how I'm going to make that happen, and then that gets passed down to the practical guys who actually have to go implement it. And there's definitely some gaps in what can be done versus what that vision is, and certainly it's how do we enable those teams, right? That's the other key, is that the executive side has to say, okay guys, I'm going to let you go do this to disrupt the things that we need to do so that we don't disrupt the whole business, but let's go disrupt part of it, right? And give them the permission to go do these things to actually accelerate these things. So that's kind of why there's still some gap, is that permission isn't being given, as well as the perception that the executive side is really behind this whole move.
Yeah, you're calling it protectionism. I call it fear, right? And you have to really, get in people's faces and make them understand that if they don't like change, they're going to like irrelevance even less. And so when you talk about you've got roughly 28% of the people who aren't embracing the fact that this is going to happen. They've got history on their side to teach them that these same arguments happened around data warehouses. These exact same arguments happened around things that look like Hadoop data lakes. And what's going to happen again for that maturity model is if the previous two took 15 years and 7 years, this one's going to take roughly 3 to 4 years to be mature. And to your point, that ramp from 15% of utilization or so, which I think is a little bit of storytelling, versus in the next year or so, it's going to be roughly 30, 40%, is pretty accurate, right? They're going to have to embrace it. And the challenge is getting those models into place, getting those use cases into place, making it real, making it scale, like to your point. All of those things are going to require people that, frankly, are untrained, and those skills don't exist yet. So to your point, education is key. I mean, education, it's key.
Well, one of the things that we learned a lot through our journey over the last year was you kind of got to get going. And the reality is this isn't a topic or a narrative that you can kind of leapfrog. So if the other companies that you're looking at are getting ahead of you in this game, it's not like you can all of a sudden make this investment and then leapfrog 2 years just because there are so many moving pieces to this. So back to the question around, is it early days? Absolutely. And it largely depends on which company you're in and what environment you're operating in. And I think a lot of people are making the mistake of talking about AI too much. What we like to talk about is business outcomes. Like, what are we trying to achieve as an organization? We're trying to drive revenue. We're trying to take cost out. We're trying to retain our customers. So how do we hitch our wagon to that horse? And how do we use the power of what we talk more about, augmented intelligence, back to Hassan's point around how it kind of, the combination of humans and algorithms are better together than they are separately. So we spend a lot of time talking about how these types of capabilities can help and assist in terms of the business outcomes that we're chasing. And I think that helps dramatically because it's not just some AI conversation, because that isn't going to get you anywhere when you're trying to sell in these ideas back into whether it's IT professionals, whether it's business owners and that type of thing. But I'd say there's one thing for us that is probably paramount, and we probably have a dozen irons in the fire on this topic, is just kind of general state of your data supply chain. You'll start to realize that no matter what use case you're activating, no matter how flush you are in certain capabilities, no matter how wealthy you are in terms of talent mix, if you haven't ironed out the end-to-end data supply chain process, this is really all for naught. Because if your data can't be onboarded effectively, cleansed effectively, categorized effectively, then consumed effectively, that's where you're going to run into a lot of problems. So what we've learned in building on, I think, a lot of our big data initiatives and some of the data warehouse discussions is the work we did years ago is starting to pay dividends for us. And by no means are we perfect. And I don't think any company is perfect here. But that's the investment that we're really focused on. Because if we don't get that right, then all of the investments in other places we're making aren't going to pan out.
And Shawn, you make some good points there, and the whole, people are trying to jump some steps and not going through the process and doing it really carefully, that one's a good one. But the other thing, and not only just making sure that end-to-end supply chain is fully laid out, but we can't forget the word that we haven't said yet on this panel, which is we got to secure that supply chain.
Of course.
Right? So we know exactly what we're getting, and we're not introducing things into that supply chain and the data that we've got, so we're not, basically living with bad data, right?
Yeah, we've made some investments, a lot of more intellectually and technology-wise around security and privacy by design. And my good friend Lloyd Switzer, who's not here, is kind of one of my cohort partners in this, but also so is our privacy officer. And we spend a lot of time and effort partnering with our privacy office around what are the right ways to drive responsible, ethical AI, not just from a concept or an idea perspective, but also how do you technically implement the right controls that as you do data transfers, as an example, that there is scrubbing technologies baked into that, so you're not doing the things that we're all concerned about in terms of sending private information out to partners or even internally. That's a big focus for us.
I agree with you, Shawn, because that same journey happened when big data as a concept came in. Every enterprise has to go through that. And the same thing that also Jaime talked about, which is really bring IT more to be aligned with the business, because really the business is looking to really transform, be competitive, and they have to really change the way they operate IT for IT versus really going and support the business and embarking on the business transformation that's happening. And that's really what we're seeing across every industry, regardless whether they are implementing AI or not. There need to be a change in the way the organization is structured to be ready for such a big move.
Yeah, I think you're making a good point. Like when we look at our swim lanes of activity, probably the most important one is kind of the change management mindset, cultural evolution that needs to happen in concert. And when I've spent a lot of time driving our digital agenda, and you can just see in the early days we were like the guys who ran the website. Then all of a sudden we're the digital team, and then next thing you know we're driving like a digital TELUS, and that's like a 3-stage type of evolution. And so we're looking at a lot of the examples and lessons that we learned through that journey and applying them to this one, because it's not very dramatically that different.
So how should companies properly manage that kind of culture change within the organization? Obviously, you require data scientists for these types of roles, and as we were talking before the panel, there's a shortage of those skilled workers.
That's right.
But data scientists aren't business people, and all of you are in the business of making money. So is that a pro or a con to have such a big shift in kind of your talent base?
Well, I think with anything that's sort of tied to a disruptive kind of thing you want to go do, whether it was the data lake transformation, now we got the transformation of using analytics, and now data science to do AI. You've got to go take teams that understand the balance across your company, your whole business. So you got to take some business people, some data scientists, some software developers, people understand the change in the culture to a much faster, agile development cycle, and take that team to go do these things, so you don't kind of have this disconnect in the conversation, right? Because that's the thing you always run into, and we see it. We've seen the disconnect between IT and network. That's starting to get eroded away. Same thing here. We're going to need to balance that team out and not just rely only on the data scientists. And that's why there's innovation going on to kind of abstract that need for that data scientist, mass of people, so we can have simpler ways to actually do the software development and the AI algorithms on the fly.
And I think companies have to partner. We've got incredible talent in the startup community across the country, and we have to bring them into our organizations. We have to partner more, and even with our own people, I think we have to give them the space to try, to play, to fail fast, to be creative, to make them feel comfortable exploring new technologies and new possibilities.
I think it's a critical point, because really, if we looked at it, data scientist is an important role that's currently in place in the context of data and big data. But also when we're talking about data scientists in the era of AI, today data scientists is really look into the data to really come and develop algorithm and develop the model. Well, guess what? Data scientist in the future is gonna really write the algorithm that really do what a data scientist is doing. So now we are shifting his responsibility from one side to another side. But that's not enough for an organization to become successful. Just imagine really having your workforce that do current traditional role, and now we need to look, as Shawn talked about, we need to have a role that supports, compliance and ethicals. We need to have a data hygienist who's really look into the data and start looking into how it will behave and how it will operate. We need somebody who's like in the typical enterprise who really sign on change in the production environment. We call them change manager. We need to create a role who's going to be really able to look into an AI algorithm and say it's ready for prime time. Oh, and by the way, it is really reporting mistake. We need to bring it back. We need to really fix it and bring it back into production. So we have to really start talking about this new role that's currently today does not exist. And those are important because we're going to live in a world where we bring the machine and the human to collaborate. Right now, we're all human. We're pretty much, talking, and we have feelings and sensing and, judgment. Now we're really, in the future, of course, we have to be ready as the next era of AI is happening. But we have to start small.
Just to elaborate on your point, Hassan, Dell actually released a study recently that I read which said they believe, and this is the most aggressive stat that I've read on this subject, they believe that 85% of jobs that are going to exist in 2030, which isn't that far out, we don't know yet.
Yeah, it actually seems highly likely, right? The format by which the job exists probably isn't the way it is today. But to the panel's point, like everybody's kind of made these great points around the process and procedure around getting these workloads into play. And it sounds a lot like the buzzword that's out there called DevOps, right? So, yeah. But the thing for AI is going to be something that looks like AI ops or ML ops. And the point being is you have to bring these data scientists and these business experts, as well as security and governance and operations and architects and everybody to the table in the same way a DevOps type story does to get these workloads out there. I mean, just have a conversation with a true data scientist and their perspective on the data, the statistics involved, the actual outcomes versus what you know from the core competencies of the organization. What they find and what's real may be sort of far apart, but taking the two and combining them together, or that large group and combining those all those perspectives together is where you get true business intelligence. Like we didn't do ourselves any favors by calling that last era of data like a couple of years ago, like BI. The real BI is going to happen when you combine those core competencies, those humans, with that AI that's kind of getting all that data and making it, first of all, rational and then, visible and things like that. The second part of this is, of course, there's a shortage, right? There's a massive shortage in all the things we're talking about, data scientists, all those kind of things. We were talking backstage and, McKinsey, knocked it out of the park talking about the shortage of data scientists in 2018 and going forward. And so what's happening is you're seeing a lot of the investments and a lot of the organizations creating software and tooling and all these things to help create what are essentially citizen data scientists, right? And that's making this data available in a rational format where even business leaders and other people can get to this and have practical AI, right? So the tooling is going to be a big thing. You're seeing all the investment there. Like, just write AI on yourself. I think a company who made tea, made like Peach AI, and all of a sudden they got like 20 million from Silicon Valley. So we're not always awesome down there, but it's like this tooling thing is going to be a big thing. You're going to see that bloom, and then hopefully there's a rationalization. There's going to be a lot of investment and obviously a lot of collapse as people buy those tools up.
Yep, so. That's where a lot of these new communities are focused on, is to build software that helps you train your data, right? And train your algorithm with your data, and actually say, bring my data to this place and have somebody actually analyze it and see what it does. So that's one piece of the puzzle. Another thing to think about very carefully is that we all say data's gold, and there's all kinds of data coming out of the network that I got to figure out what to do with. Well, do we want to parse all that data or not, or do we want to kind of flip that on its head and actually say, you know what, I want, as you said, Shawn, I want business outcomes. So what is the business outcome that I want the data to go get for me? And so one of our customers in Finland has actually taken this approach, where they decided what they want to go do, written their algorithms to actually go get that information specifically out of their network and use it in that fashion, right? So that's, the other thing you got to look at is what's the most efficient way to, go get the information you need rather than try to, scrub everything to go figure it out from the mess you got coming at you, because it's coming at you, like a fire hose, especially when we hit IoT and everything else we want to do.
I think just to answer your point around the data scientist piece, what we're also seeing is this idea of data concierge. this idea of data engineering is extremely important, even in some instances more so than the science part, especially with the advent of some of the tooling that we're seeing. But I think a couple of us hit it on the head. The partnership angle is extremely important. You need to realize and be conscious that you don't have all the answers. Like, don't suffer from not invented here syndrome, and work with others and build an ecosystem of partners around you. And I think the other great point was this kind of, we talked a bit about it in the Agile piece, but this pod type structure and this collection of people with different perspectives from different parts of the organization, just like algorithms and humans are better together, the power of that collective is far better together than as individuals. And we're seeing amazing things happen when we co-locate teams in a pod structure that have multidisciplinary kind of skill sets. And it not only does it come better together, but everybody starts to empathize better with each other because they have a better understanding of everybody's world. And that's been very valuable for us. So,
Shawn, you brought up the issue of ethical transparency. And I think that's a very important discussion to have. And, how should companies handle this issue? And is it the role of companies, for example, to police their suppliers who are already embedding AI in their products? Yeah. Where does that ethical transparency begin and where does it end? I'd like to hear from all of you on that.
Yeah, there's not one answer to it. It's funny, like we have a series of work streams. One of them is embedded AI. And understanding how to not only protect ourselves contractually around those capabilities, but also even train our team members on how to leverage them effectively, some where there's tooling available and some when there's self-optimizing type of environments. So the ethical, responsible, reducing bias discussion is multifaceted. It has anything to do with embedded and suppliers. It has to do with how you onboard and train your team members. It has to do with what kind of even technical controls can you put in place in your pipelines or in your technology path to production to also protect yourself. And so we're doing a whole wath of things around policies, around training, around technology, because it's not one of those things, it's all of those things working together. And I think that's the challenge with this whole topic, especially when you're inside of a large enterprise, is you have all of these streams working together in concert over an extended period of time. So this idea of like really strong change management, really strong program management, managing all of these dependencies is not easy. Like, it's really difficult.
I want to comment on that. That's important because take it on an enterprise level and look into an enterprise that are global level. So they are dealing with other enterprises that are also embarking on AI, and they are doing, Shawn, exactly the same thing that probably TELUS is doing. Establish, compliance, privacy rule, but that's no standard. Everybody is doing it really to protect what they are currently obligated to do towards their society, towards their client, towards their consumers. So now, are we going to really end up seeing some sort of a difference in how every enterprise view it? And is there really going to open the discussion how we want to really standardize on this? How we want to at least get to a level of really understanding, common understanding of what's really the minimum. It even go furthermore when we're talking about ethical and data privacy, because we're going to get into a situation where we have multiple enterprise or multiple organizations really developing the end product of AI. Just take, for example, algorithm and AI that might do something to do with the music. So there's a product, and that music is synced to a cloud, any cloud you want to. So now we're talking about who owns that end product. Is it the cloud platform? Is it the company that developed the AI? Or is it the AI itself? Because guess what? It's machine learning. It's really optimizing itself as it really learns. So we're having also a lot of set of challenges, which is, I agree with Shawn, there's no simple answer for this.
So the EU is moving in that direction of having a common set of standards. Is that what we require to solve this ethical AI issue? Do we need to have a common set of global standards?
There's sort of a need for standards, but while you're building those standards, you've got to collaborate on what's the right way to get to those standards. Yeah. And I think if we're going to talk about ethical connections and making sure that we're working collaboratively to actually solve the same problem, while not being too protective on what we're doing, I guess we got to go back to your topic, Jaime, earlier this this week, which was how do we take advantage of yet another technology to build blockchain into these things for making that who controls the data, who owns the data, and that this is properly controlled in every type of enterprise. So that's another thing that we can use to help it. But there's all kinds of things within the company that companies that are being run today that aren't taking advantage of that technology yet. So we got to kind of go build through that process, just like we are with AI, and figure out where the merge points are to connect those things. So it's, I'm definitely on the same page that this is a multi-dimensional problem.
And on top of multidimensional, right? You literally have like almost polar opposites of outcomes. So you look at a company like a Page AI, which is trying to solve cancer, through imaging and artificial intelligence, and like nobody's mad about that, right? But the thing about it is there's tons of legislation in place that prevents them from getting the type of data necessary to actually be fully successful in their mission, like to make that model as aggressive as possible, simply because of privacy. And that privacy is extremely important, but there has to be a way to get the data available so that we can do things for these kind of greater good outcomes while keeping the privacy. On the other side of it, you have the whole, data's the new oil thing where everybody wants to monetize everything. And like somebody probably just sold a picture of me from in this room, for $5 or something. And it's the other side of it, right? It's the, Mark Zuckerberg in Congress type problem. And that requires a whole other thing, which is, we don't want to over-legislate things, but we do want some sort of protections around people's information on the other side, which is being taken advantage of, even though they all gave it away for free, allegedly, right? So I think frankly, we all know by our emails and all the contract updates that GDPR is here. I think it's a good first step. I don't know if I would implement it exactly like that, but I think it's the right step in the right direction of the other side, right, of the personal privacy side. There needs to be some openness on the shared economy of saving the world type things, that we need to be able to kind of open up that end of it.
And I think for our small, medium businesses out here, we can't expect SMBs to police all of these things. They just don't have the resources. So we need standards.
So there is some talk in Canada that maybe one possible solution is to enhance the powers of the Privacy Commissioner, or to enhance privacy legislation. What are your thoughts on all of that? Would more regulation be a help or a hindrance?
Well, I think this panel and probably audience is aware that I think blockchain is something we really, really need to look at when it comes to data privacy at the individual level in particular. I'm sure many of us in this room would love to help contribute to the work being done around cancer research if we knew that it was for that purpose and it was going to be anonymous and remain private. But as long as we have data stored in central repositories where you can't control the use and it becomes something that can be compromised, it's a real struggle. So, Ian did steal my punchline. I think we have to seriously explore what can be done around blockchain.
As long as I think it's outcome oriented, so it's not a hindrance, but it's in pursuit of the greater outcome, I think that's going to be key. And I think the telecom industry has flourished on standards for many, many years. And when you look at our percentage of revenue spend on IT versus other industries like banking that isn't as regulated as telecom, not regulated, but standardized as telecom, you start to see the benefits inherent in that standardization and how it will help the industry. It'll drive a little bit more of a level playing field, but it also reduce the spend that we'll have to drive in terms of capital to drive these capabilities to market.
Right. And the things that some of the if you're looking at global operators who actually they have anywhere from 20 to 30 I'll call it very specific legal agreements they have with each other. And we need to get to a point where we take advantage of these technologies to use higher level APIs to actually make that business transaction transparent and legal between them. So that, and again, distributed, right? Back to your point again, so that we can actually do that. And that also helps with that. But as far as the regulation piece of it, they have to be part of the conversation, but not like as a distant, you have to go do it this way. They have to, collaborate with us on this process to get to the point where we have that right balance of standardization and regulation so it can prosper. We can do the things we want to, for the humanitarian reasons that we want to go do them.
Brian, you look like you want to say something.
I'm listening intently. I'm just falling in love with the panel here. So, again, it's the other side of that argument is I seem to be contrarian today. I guess that's who I am. Is that there are certain types of transactions that need to be private, and so they're part of this entire kind of blockchain workload is that there's research being done on kind of the full private version of it. The risk in the full privacy is that, of course, things that people want to see can be hidden. We've learned that from basically any sort of cryptography in modern age. And so I think there's a lot to be learned here, right? And so that's one of the things that I love that people are investing in. Again, I think I'm challenged with figuring out the use cases, like how it's practically implemented, and blockchain becomes like a database of databases, and you've got data, northbound, southbound extensibility, and all these kind of things. But like it's valuable. I see it coming. I actually don't see it coming as fast as like basically like rational artificial intelligence is. And I think there's a lot of people who have a lot of benefit in making sure they control the outcomes, right? You have that 51% rules and all these kind of things. So there's a lot to learn here, and that's the fun part about it, right? And I think most of us, the great thing is the general population is learning about it from Silicon Valley, the TV show, not the actual valley. But everything else, I think it's a very good research point, right? I think everybody should be researching into it. Frankly, I think there should be a lot of federal, like, government subsidies into blockchain research, right? Like, that's where we should be investing. Canada did a great job in investing in artificial intelligence. That's why we're all sitting here today, right? So thank you, Canada, for keeping it alive when the torch went out and in all the math universities and things like that. So keeping the torch alive for blockchain would be a pretty solid investment.
Hassan, I want to give you the last word in terms of what on regulation or what policymakers should be considering.
I think the key things, as this panel said, it's important to really not look at it from just pure requirements and guidelines, but also look at it also and how it's going to really be enabled by what the technology is in place today. Sometimes, like blockchain technology is going to really allow us to protect what we are trying to do, allow us to really, protect the end user consumers, protect the data and the contents. So I think we need to bring both the policy aspect and the technology aspect much more closer to collaborate together on this. Otherwise, it will be always two different views. We have a full-blown advance in R&D around technology, and we're seeing it like implemented and deployed, and we still have, the policy is really working in their own kind of, timeline and own guidelines. So that's really important to bring them together.
So we want to take some questions from the audience. There's some mics set up here. Does anybody have any questions for our panelists? Nobody?
I guess you get to ask some more.
Oh, I have plenty of other questions to ask you. So just kind of continuing this discussion, I'm really curious because this has come up in many discussions I've had with a number of people, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of agreement on this. Aside from bringing the regulators into the room, what else can Canada do to remain relevant in the AI space? We're right next door to the big giant, the south of us, and there has been a shift in kind of incentives for businesses actually, and for people to flow south in some ways. The President of the United States has cut taxes. Our competitive advantage here for business taxes and personal taxes has been eroded. The salaries there are bigger. There are some pros on the U.S. side. There's some immigration policies that the President has talked about that could be detrimental, that might be favorable to Canada. But what are the sorts of things that policymakers should be doing to make sure that Canada maintains its advantage in AI?
I think it's part of a bigger plan. I think it's not just really the policies and the encouragement of people. I think it's really the academic investments in the academics, investments in the enterprise. And I think it's also to reach out and grow overall really the geography that we're really on. That's really what's going to drive people to come here and to pretty much really stay here and have the talents, and going to drive competitiveness and drive really a reason to pretty much stay relevant and have the pretty much not to move into other countries. I think that's another thing. And of course, the financial aspect of it is really how you want to compete against other enterprises and create relevant IP that's really become key for Canada overall.
Because it's not just really the United States. It's China's a major player. Israel's a major player.
India. I mean, there are multiple AI hubs that are really being developed and created And pretty much everybody is looking into the same way.
And so it's not just about, there's investment, things for education and making sure that we've got that relevant, economics on how taxation is done. But the other thing is that, it's about participating and collaborating freely across the globe on this, right? Not just with the US, but everywhere. And that's how Canada can be seen to be relevant, just like any other community of interest, that's how you, really participate in it and make sure that, the people that are investing in that, with their time are rewarded for doing so, right? So that's kind of the challenge is that, if you don't actually, help drive that collaboration globally, then people go look to see where they can actually participate and where that's going on. So they'll go find some other country to go, go do their work and their research.
I think Canada needs to get a little bit more swagger on the subject. We have the third largest talent pool available in this space, despite how small we are on the global stage. We have a really, really diverse population, and we encourage it. We're culturally open. We're also generally collaborative. We recognize that we're small, and it makes us more likely to share and collaborate and work together. And I think those three things combine to make us a force in the continued innovation, not just in AI, but everything else we've talked about today. So, I think our government's doing a really good job of continuing to invest. In 2017, they invested $125 million to ensure that we're talking to each other across all of our centers. So I think they need to continue to invest and support us for sure, and we need to get confident in all that we have in Canada and just build on it.
Yeah, I have the benefit of having an outsider's perspective here, and frankly, first of all, I think you're probably a little better at it than you think you are.
Swagger.
Yeah, you have a fantastic culture, and swagger is not necessarily the biggest part of it, right?
We don't have much swagger.
Neither are
That's what I'm
questions
saying.
from the
We got
audience,
no
although
swagger.
some brave soul just showed up. I believe you need to treat artificial intelligence like you do the Winter Olympics, which is you have a massive amount of talent, you show up, you kick tail, and you take all the medals home. And so, you really do. You have everything that you need. I think there should be some investment from the education perspective, from a university. Continue to use, leverage your own talents internally here. Again, you have one of the largest houses of AI in the world right here. And, additionally, I would just say that those corporations that are investing appropriately, like, go big. And then tell everybody about it, right? Like, be transparent in a way, not like don't be braggadocious, because you're not, but be transparent and show everybody what you're doing, and show not only that you're doing it, but that you're being good while you're doing it. And that's marketing in and of itself. And but I think you're a lot further there than you think you are.
Yeah, I think we're on the right path and doing the right things. And I think everybody's talked about that. Whether it's public sector, whether it's private sector, whether it's what's happening in academia, whether what we're seeing across the university institutions like we talked about. But for me, one of the things I've learned a lot is, like, building something is not necessarily the hard part. Sometimes sustaining that is even far more difficult than building it in the first place. So what we need to think about as a collective is, how do we collaborate, how do we continue to coordinate, and how do we band together, I think, is what you're hearing across the panel, and I couldn't agree more. But we got to think about a collective sustainability agenda. So as we make these investments, the hundreds of millions of dollars, and as we support startups like Integrate or Element or pick your flavor, like, I think it's really important that we put, or the government potentially puts, a bit of a heavy sustainability agenda. Like, how are we going to stand up these capabilities, these forums, and start getting the public sector, the private sector to lean in? But how are we going to put an agenda on the table that says we're going to maintain this and sustain this for the long run? And that's much, much more harder than building it, in my experience. And so it's early days, and I think we're doing the right things, but the rubber meets the road in terms of how much more we lean into it, especially the private sector.
Sir, you have a question.
Oh, hi, thank you. I'm Jeff with the Employer of Choice Program, and my background is call center customer service. And you may have covered this off earlier, I got here a little bit late, but I wanted to get your insights or opinions on how you think AI is going to impact the customer experience going forward, and more specifically, where would it best be deployed in a contact center or customer service type department?
Who are you directing your question to?
Let's start in the middle.
With me?
It's all on you.
It's all
It's all on me.
We're taking this one off.
I think many enterprises are already experimenting with bots. I think there's a lot of value there. I think as AI gets better and better, on the language side, I think that's going to help. And really, in contact centers, what you want to be able to deliver is a consistent customer experience. You want to reduce or eliminate where possible hold times. I mean, we're all still experiencing long hold times when we're calling into contact centers. I think that's kind of the first area that we can really, really leverage AI to help drive an advantage. And then ultimately for our contact center workforces, move them up the stack, get them using their brain again, or more, I should say. About 40% of those jobs tend to be really purely redundantly administrative, and that's work that AI can certainly help solve for, so that they're doing things that are more creative, more innovative, more value add to the customer and to the enterprise.
Yeah, I definitely agree on the number of times I've called into a call center and immediately figured out that I'm talking to somebody in the Philippines or in India or whatever else. And so definitely the language thing needs to be dealt with. But certainly the other thing is I really measure call hold time as to how long that is, and if it takes we all have our patience tolerance varies, but it's all getting lower is kind of the thing. And definitely we can take advantage of it to, again, improve that experience regardless of it is, because the experience of an entire business isn't just the service you bought, the thing you bought. It's how you actually deal with them completely through the whole cycle of if I have to call in, if I'm looking at my bill, and all those kind of things. And these things have to be consistent, for those of us that have to go work through that. And so I see that it can take help do that, but we're still early in applying it. Now you also asked where we should deploy it, and again, it's at the moment it's all really large, big, centralized data centers, call centers, lots of people. I can see this becoming a distributed play as well, but again, it comes down to the economics of what it costs to put the people in those places, right? So that's the other challenge, and I'm pretty sure that after meeting with TELUS yesterday and talking about what TELUS International is up to, you can explain to us on that front.
Like we've been getting very creative. I'd say our bot program is well over a year old now, and we took this pretty interesting intellectual thought around it, which is like, how do we train a bot like a call center agent? And so what we've been able to do is stand up an automated care team and have really embraced this idea of, if we train a human for X amount of weeks on a set of curriculum, what kind of parallels or how can we apply that to, a bot or a machine learning algorithm? So we've been leaning into this for over a year, and it's manifested itself in various different ways. So if you call into our Kudo call center, you'll get a prompt through our IVR to say, hey, push 1 if you want to deal with our virtual assistant. We'll send you a text message, you click on the link, you're quickly into an experience. If you actually use chat on our website, on TELUS.com, you'll see that you'll get intercepted by a bot, and the bot can quickly direct you to an agent, but what we're seeing is high levels of containment rate through that. And not only are we doing those capabilities and putting them in front of the customer, we're starting to also put those capabilities in front of call center agents, where we're leveraging bots and those types of capabilities to actively mine knowledge management kind of databases around helping them get much easier access to data, looking at bots to help them process more complex tasks. Unfortunately, still when you call into a call center and you're complaining about a bill as an example, sometimes an agent on the other end, regardless of what industry or what company you're interacting with, has to go through quite a significant amount of team member effort to kind of do those calculations. And we're seeing the power of bots help us solve those problems. So it's not necessarily just one thing that we're doing, but a lot of the use cases that we're seeing that are applicable in the contact center environment are both not only for the customer, but also for the team member as well.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point about kind of the growth vector again of something like this. I think fundamentally natural language processing is relatively solved. I mean, it's not 100% solved, but it's almost globally relatively solved. And so then you get into what do you do after that, right? So you can answer a simple question, but when you get into integrating things like customer retention and empathy and all of these kind of things, it's exponentially more difficult, and you can apply this directly to, I mean, it's a fun topic to talk about, but all the self-driving car stuff, right? It's like, We're barely on stage 2, and stage 2 is a little bit scary, and we're supposed to go to stage 5. It's exponentially harder, right? It's logarithmically harder to get to stage 5, and we're a long way away from that. I mean, right now we can barely get the automated, the hand washer things for the sinks to recognize you every time you show up, and yet somehow we're going to trust these cars to drive us around while we do nothing else, right? There's a long path. So to your point, I think you use it, and you use it in edge use cases, and it's to augment the number of humans that you have to have who can really focus on doing their job really well.
I'm not going to agree with you on where we are with natural language until I get any sort of automated assistant to call me Jaime instead of Jaime.
They're just using the wrong accent.
But again, it's a long game. Like the capabilities and the maturity of our bot at day 1 versus 12 months later are very different. So it's, again, this isn't something that you can leapfrog. You can't necessarily train bots on all of the different permutations and use cases of your environment. Like the feedback loops we're leveraging, the way our team members are harvesting, how customers are interacting with bots, and then using it to constantly refine it, puts you in a position where, like, if you as an organization don't wrap a strong program around it, put, you know, the right leaders in front of those programs, and then actively measure and keep that dialogue alive, you're going to start to realize that you might do some great things, but your ability to sustain it and even grow to the next level is going to be very challenged. It's no different than running a very long-term network program, whether you're doing a fiber build or whether you're evolving your wireless network. It's no different to how you would manage any one of those large 5 to 10 year type investment programs.
Shawn, you brought a good point, because definitely it's about maturity and it's about continued improvement. But from technology perspective, as we are really integrating into our chatbot or bot machine learning, and we give it the capability to look into data and train data and understand data and experiment with data, it's pretty much going to adjust itself, and it's going to really come with more value add for the end customers. And that's really what we are seeing where every enterprise is starting with, like, the first step, as you said, and they're trying to build that maturity model moving forward.
Yeah. But we've got to get sort of past what I call the basic Q&A conversation that we see with Duplex and all these other things that are training themselves to, you know, to speak like us. Because I was actually very pleasantly surprised when I called in for an issue. It wasn't for me. It was for my daughter. Right? So I called in and said, you know, she's having trouble with this. You know, can you talk to her and get her through this, situation? And he said, no problem. What's her number? And I kind of let it go. I was very surprised and very happy that I got a call back. I was in California. My daughter was in Vancouver. And they called me back about 20 minutes later and said, we talked to your daughter. It's been solved. And I went, okay, these guys get it.
Awesome.
Right? But that also tells you it's not just about the technology, right? It's about processes, it's about training, it's all of these things working together.
Right? So that's the thing that we got to make sure that if we're training these bots to go do these things, to make sure that the end customer is getting the result of, yes, it did get solved, I resolved your problem, and here's how I did it. Right? Because it's not just that initial engagement conversation, it's that did you actually finish the job?
That's amazing.
Good point.
Okay, well, it looks like we only have less than 2 minutes. Does anybody have any quick final words?
Who wants to jump in?
Final salvos?
I mean, there are so many things we haven't even touched on. Autonomous driving obviously is going to deliver incredible benefits to society as a whole, genomics and where that goes. I think we're just getting started on where this technology is going to take us.
I'd say start now. There's really no good time to change. And again, like I said, you can't leapfrog this stuff. So I think the sooner you get going, the better we'll all be in the long run.
Actually, I will have to disagree on that one.
Oh, no.
The question is, it's not how or what, it's not how we do this, the when, but actually the when was yesterday.
For sure. Sorry.
Start yesterday.
Start yesterday.
Start yesterday.
Exactly.
But you're still better off starting today.
Fair enough.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Rita and panelists. That was great. We love panels like this where we have 5 different panelists, each representing different constituencies, but with relevant, topical, and interesting things to say. So Rita, Hassan, Ian, Jaime.
Nice one, Michael.
Brian and Shawn, thank you very much for giving of your time. Thank you.